And welcome back to Sullivan's Unheard Voices. I'm here with my good friend Holly Nunn. Holly, and we have Willow between us. Thank you very much for being here today.
Happy to be here.
So, I wanted to have a conversation with you about neurodivergency, and here's why. I've known you now for over a year.
Yeah.
And we have spent how many hours talking about neurodivergency?
So many.
So
many
many.
daily talking about neurodivergency.
And so I just kind of wanted to have that conversation because, and truth be told, I'm more nervous about this conversation than I've ever been about a podcast before.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Because I want to make sure I get it right.
That's fair.
And it's interesting because, like, when you base the conversation on your lived experience versus what medical professionals think,
right,
and what other people think,
right,
and the fact that there's competing narratives, it just makes for, just want to make sure that I get it right.
I think where you aim with that, though, is that you start from the lived experience, honestly, and you say, here's what it can be, right? Because it could be many different things, and what neurodivergency looks like to me versus what it looks like to you versus what it looks like to some of our friends who we also know are neurodivergent is going to be a different story every single time. And I don't know that, I mean, that's the problem with the medical narrative, is that it's one side of one story and it doesn't fit everybody.
Yeah, and it's such a broad, I hate to use the word spectrum because neurodivergency isn't just autism spectrum. It's more than that.
It's an umbrella.
Yeah. And so, like, it's such a large umbrella that I think a lot of people aren't really sure what it means.
And it's more inclusive of people than you think it is, because it's not just autism and ADHD. It's also anymore. It's anxiety. It's depression. It's Down syndrome. It
Dyslexia.
is dyslexia, dyspraxia, OCD. It is PTSD. It's definitely CPTSD. And I mean, the list goes on and on and on. And it's much more effective to people than we think it is. And so it's not just any one flavor. Is that it's going to be like, okay, well, what does neurodivergency look like in a workforce, in a day-to-day, in a relationship? Well, each one of those is going to have its own flavor.
And it's going to be a little different.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. How young were you when you realized there was something slightly different about the way you thought?
When it was validated or when I wondered?
When you wondered.
I don't even remember. I realized that I was a little bit not like other people my age when I was probably about 4 or 5. And I was very bright. And that makes it hard in a different way.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of cover up that happens there. That means that some of those stereotypical things never showed with me, but I had to work harder in areas than other people did, and subsequently didn't have to work hard in a lot of areas that other people did.
That makes sense.
So there were things that other people had to really work on, and they're like, well, why is it so easy for you? I'm like, I don't know.
And that's a huge part of the story that's missing for me, just because I've blacked out everything before like the age of 16.
Yeah.
So I have no recollection of, or no real memory of what I was like in elementary school or middle school. Like, I don't remember.
I remember some little bits and pieces, mostly of the things that like I got in arguments with my family about because of like, they're wanting me to succeed and there's things that are hard for me. Why is it hard for you when everyone else seems to manage? Things like I was very good at doing homework and I would forget to turn it in. Got all the way to the finish line and I tripped.
And for me, I would do all of my homework. Like, I remember I did every single piece of math homework my sophomore year of high school. A week into class. I did all of my homework.
Do everything. Do it now.
But I didn't show any of my work. And so they got on me because I couldn't.
Yeah.
I just knew the answer. I didn't know how to show my work.
Oh, I got there.
And so, like,
it was right.
Failing math
right
on more than one occasion just because I couldn't show my work.
I struggled with math too, and it's not that I'm bad at math. I struggled with math because I kept asking, where does this apply in real life? I was really good at geometry because I could see it.
Yeah.
I could put it together. We're learning this angle on this side and how that all works together. That was great. I could do that all day long. You get into something like algebra and you're asking me like what this equation is used for. And I had a teacher one time in high school. Obviously won't say any names, but I said I had a teacher one time and I asked, excuse me, because I'm not trying to be snarky. I'm trying to make this stick in my head. And I said, where does this pertain? Why are we learning this? What is it for? Where is it going to be used? And the teacher said, because it's going to be on the test.
And that's not good enough for our
I
brains.
didn't learn anything else that whole class. Because if the whole point was just to test about it, all right, it's in my short-term recall. I have no idea what we learned that whole year.
That makes total sense. And I remember I knew I was different in high school because I could never hang out with more than a couple people at a time because I would mask and because my survival skill is mimicking. And I think that's one of those unique autistic traits. But once you get from one friend group to the next,
how do you blend those two?
I could never. And
you can't wear two masks at the same time.
Yeah, and so I would keep these friend groups separate. And I'm sure I have no idea what they thought about the whole thing, right?
Yeah.
But they were just for some reason or another, most of them were kind of accepting of it.
There's oh well, that's just how it is.
1/4 of the morning I would hang out with this group, and then the afternoon I would hang out with a different group, and then
I kind of bopped around a lot in high school as well. I didn't fit in any one group.
Yeah.
I was part of the artsy kids and the band kids and the theater kids, but I was also with the choir kids and the newspaper kids and the yearbook kids, and it was everybody but the cool kids, basically.
Yeah.
So I was hanging out with. But even then, they didn't. In class, they didn't dislike me. I just was like, okay, I just don't want to play the game, right?
Yeah.
So that was something that I noticed as well in my earlier years, is that I fit in with a lot of different people, but I didn't stay in any one group. I also noticed that I had an intensity when it came to friendship that was really hard for people to accept.
I think that's a good point to sort of start from. Right? Because
it's a little intense sometimes.
Well, and the one thing I hear time and time and time again from an autism perspective is it's impossible to make friends.
Yeah.
Now, it's impossible to make the level of friendship that some people want. And I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think it's based on a misconception or misperception of what level of friendship.
Oh, sure. Required. That is a whole conversation of itself. Just so, to people who don't know me, I come from a slightly more ADHD side. We joke between the two of us that I'm peer-reviewed autistic, that it's been approved, but I'll never be able to probably get a diagnosis for it because I have too many other things that are in the way of that. But that being said, it's a little bit different coming from that perspective. I could make friends, I just can't keep them.
Okay.
Because I burn them out. They get tired. They get, I get to a point where I need growth and they don't want to grow. And so now I've outgrown friendships and things like that. But going back to that concept of level of friendships, this is actually a conversation I've had, oddly enough, with my therapist for a long time. Because even if there's nothing majorly wrong, there's nothing wrong with therapy. I would preach that therapy is good for everybody. I wish everybody had therapy. And I wish that that's something that everybody could have. But we have this conversation every so often of, okay, Holly, what are the level of friendship that you're looking for? And where it gets interesting is, to me, what I consider a friend, just base level friend.
Yeah.
Most people consider a best friend.
Interesting.
So I am 1 to 2 links higher on the scale, or lower on the scale. So what normal people consider friends, I'm that's just somebody I know. That's an acquaintance. That's somebody I can see in the hallway at work and be like, hey, how's it going? And they're like, no, we're friends. I'm are we? Have we ever had a conversation that wasn't about, the weather or work or, whatever? But I don't consider that a friend. I consider that somebody I know of and that I can talk to.
I get that.
If I can't talk about something personal or something that's soul related to me, I don't consider that a friend. Not that there's anything wrong with the person, just that that's not where my brain equates friendship level. Friendship level means we can talk about the hard stuff. We can talk about the messy stuff that doesn't have nice, clean edges. And most people reserve that level of emotional intimacy. I know that's a hard word for some people, but that level of emotional intimacy with like a best friend or more. And so then what I consider a best friend weirds people out because they can reserve that level of intimacy for like partners or like soul level friends. And so I'm just trying to find people that I can jive with. And it's like I'm asking them to emotionally get in bed with me or something. And they're like, and people go, whoa, that's too much intimacy. And I just want to share my heart. But it's a different level of intensity than most people are used to, especially neurotypical people. They have, I don't want to say it's guarded because it's not exactly that, but those levels are just different. And so I have to know that my levels are going to be down one from everyone else's, and I have to kind of adjust, and that's really hard.
See, and for me, it's kind of, I don't know where I fit on that sort of spectrum of things. I do know I wish I had more bandwidth for more friends. And like for the first time in my life, I'm kind of at a point where I'm at a capacity.
Cap.
Yeah, which is strange because I'm so used to it being the other way around. So deprived of attention, but I have no idea.
Is it attention or is it connection? Because attention makes it sound like you need someone to focus on you. And I know you don't always like to be the center of attention.
Oh, so I never want to be the center of
attention. So
you
don't strive for attention, you strive for connection.
Yes.
Because I think if you wanted attention, that would be a whole other thing. And you're like, no,
but I only have a certain amount of attention I can give.
Ah, okay. That makes more sense.
And I've done it to myself because of my schedule and everything that I've got going on now.
We also have trouble saying no, by the way.
Oh, 100%. I wouldn't know anything about that.
Yeah.
But and so like now it's trying to find that second tier level, right? Because like I have you that I consider as one of my best friends.
Same.
And then like Janetta and Ray as people I text on the daily.
On the daily.
Everyone else, it's not a daily thing. Like I have very few people that I text on the daily. And I think and I don't know if that's a bandwidth issue or if it's just, I don't know. I know if I were to reserve another friendship at our level, it wouldn't be sustainable. That's because I don't have enough time.
That's fair.
And so when I hear people complain like I don't have any friends, my question is the neurotypical sense: is it the levels? Do we think, or is it another aspect? Because that's the part where I kind of get in the middle. Like, how does this sort of work?
When I have gone through times, and I go through them frequently, where I feel like I don't have any friends, I don't feel like I connect with anybody. It is usually a lack of levels that I'm feeling a lack of, not a lack of people.
Okay.
Because there are people I could reach out to and say, "Hey, what are you doing?" But that doesn't necessarily mean that person's going to go, "How are you doing?"
Right.
Which might be what I need. Or someone who is going to sit there and listen to me wax poetic about my hyperfocus for the next 10 minutes and not just roll their eyes and go, "Okay, I gotta go now." Because that's a certain level of vulnerability. You're like, I have this that I need to get off my chest because I'm excited about it, and I need someone to listen in a way that isn't going to make me feel like my hobby's stupid.
Yeah, I know how that goes.
Someone who gets it, Yeah.
Or not even somebody gets it. Somebody who's willing to let you and let me be themselves in their obsession for fun. It doesn't really matter if I'm 100% obsessed in the same thing you are. I want to hear you out and hear what you have to say, which is rare amongst people.
That's also how I gain new hobbies.
That's fair.
Because I listen to other people be really passionate about it. I'm like, I should be really passionate about that too. That's a great thing to be passionate about.
Do you find you place limits on that though? So here's where I'm going with that.
So what do you mean by that?
I know I only have a certain amount of bandwidth for obsessions. And so I have a filter on what I start. So I know that once I start, I can't stop.
Yeah.
And I can go into the 8-hour, 12-hour, 24-hour rabbit hole of researching a topic. And so, therefore, nowadays, I have a cap on what I start.
And I think that's where we come from slightly different perspectives on this one because I come from, I start from the ADHD land, right?
Yeah.
And so I don't have to worry about that because I'm going to get bored with it before I reach that point. And
I could get bored with it before I reach that point.
and I cycle through hobbies. So, anyone who knows me personally knows I moved not that long ago, and so there was a lot of packing and going through things. And one of the things that was exciting for me was opening up boxes and going, I forgot I had this hobby and I'm really excited about it. And now I get to do it again because I had put it in a box when I got bored or sick of it, 2 months ago or 6 months ago. And then I can rediscover it. There's also a joke in my family that I go through chapters of hobbies. I'll be really into video games for like 3 months and then I'm kind of burned out on that. So then I'm going to be really into reading for like 3 months and then it's going to be really into doing something outside. And I just kind of just cycle through some similar like things. And maybe it's an art hobby for a couple of months. But I kind of go through these cycles then of different styles of hobbies. And it's very similar to the idea of having a safe autistic food that all of a sudden gets the ick.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the one you go to and all of a sudden you're like, this isn't doing it anymore.
Yeah, after like 20 years of doing the same thing.
Yeah, this peanut butter and jelly ain't quite touching it anymore.
Yeah.
And so then you got to find a new one. And so that cycle just happens more frequently with an ADHD person because our dopamine levels are so much more fleeting and hard to hang on to. So I just have to rotate through stuff and I'll get really into something. There are hobbies that I have put on the side because I know I don't have the money, the capacity, the storage space to start another one. I want to do leather journal making and make my own paper and the whole 9 yards. And I've done enough research to know how expensive it would be and to know that it's feasible and that I don't have time. So I have it and I'm going to at some point, but not yet. Can't right this second.
And I'm exactly the opposite. Like for, I would say, going on 20 years, I would watch, well, not that long. So ever since there was NFL Sunday Ticket, I would watch every single football game. Like every single football game, every week. It used to drive my partner nuts.
Mm-hmm.
And I couldn't stop. And until I just stopped. I can't just watch one game.
Yeah.
And or one team. I can't do it.
I would wonder if we're kind of drifting a little bit into comorbidity land here.
Okay.
Because that sounds very much like an obsessive compulsive thing, which often some of those traits are evident in autism and ADHD. And because it's a neurodivergency, if you have one neurodivergency, you're like 70% more likely to have one of these others, which is why I have like a skin condition and hyperflexible joints sometimes and all these other things. Irritable bowel syndrome and gut problems. Like if you have one, you're likely to have this whole other list of things. And OCD is one of them. Anxiety is one of them. Depression is one of them. And so this concept of I'm missing something. If I don't watch every single one, I might miss something.
I didn't think that was it, though.
Or just to check it off the list. I mean, even then,
it was just a matter of I'm obsessed with watching football.
Yeah.
Because I told myself I'm enjoying this. And I think there's a distinction between telling myself that I'm enjoying this and actually enjoying it. And I was starting to realize, wait a minute. Like, because I wasn't giving myself enough permission to do other things or sort of, and so for like 6 months out of the year, I'd be checking.
There's some rigidity in autism that I have learned in my conversations with you, that there is this need for stability and this need for routine. And so I wonder if the routine broke and the need for routine was so strong that you just kept doing it anyway. Like it wasn't scratching the itch where it needed to be scratched, but because it was the routine, we just did it anyway.
Yeah, in the hopes that by immersing myself in totality, that it would scratch that itch.
Because what you just said was, I told myself that I enjoy this.
Yeah.
Not that you actually enjoyed it. I
Oh, no.
told myself that I enjoyed it.
That last season, I knew I didn't.
Right?
Yeah.
And so I do that sometimes with relaxing, where it's like, this is my relaxing hobby. Why isn't it working? Because I told myself this is my relaxing hobby and it's not actually relaxing anymore. Because I put all this pressure on it to be the thing.
Interesting. And I'm curious, so like, when you do shift from like that one, the thing, to the next, at what point do you recognize that it's sort of filling that autism need as opposed to something else?
Kind of that light bulb of, hey, this is a new thing.
Yeah.
I don't know that I do until I realize I haven't done that other thing in a long time and I didn't miss it.
Yeah. Okay.
And then what am I doing in that space? Oh, I'm doing this other thing. Huh. And usually that's about the time that I start getting, because my cycles for that thing go a lot fast.
Yeah.
So that's about the time I start going, I don't know that I like it anymore. But it's interesting, and it's interesting to kind of realize that you go through these cycles or these seasons in your body where I mean you can have a favorite food, a favorite texture, a favorite whatever, and you have to just be willing to wake up one day and realize that you don't like it anymore. And that's the reality for a lot of neurodivergent people in a lot of different ways. What used to work doesn't always work forever.
And it's not a taper off.
It's not just a light
that
switch.
Goes down.
Yep.
It's just one day you woke up and like, oh my goodness, now I hate avocados and I don't know why. And,
exactly.
And a lot of folks, and this is the plea for those of you who are not neurodivergent, who know somebody is, when this happens, give them some grace.
Please don't be mad at us. We can't help it. It frustrates us too.
Mm-hmm. And that seems to be like that's one of the things that I would love to get out of our conversation today is about what it would take for acceptance to occur. And I know that's a long conversation. And one of the things that I'd like to start with just the difference in communication styles. Mm-hmm. And I have been trying for 7 months to help sort of dive into bottom up versus top down thinking. Mm-hmm. And correct me if I'm wrong. So most of the communication errors I see in between neurotypical and neurodivergent is that piece.
What do you mean by the top down, bottom up? Because I think I know what you mean, but I want to make sure that I know how you're using that.
So a lot of the things that they talk about is this double empathy problem, or not being able to see the forest through the trees. Okay. And so we tend to start with the details, and we tend to want all of the details we possibly can about a subject before we start engaging in the activity. Mm-hmm. Whereas people who are not neurodivergent tend to just need enough details to start, and then they get upset or they get frustrated when we're trying to convey or talk about all of the details.
Gotcha. Okay.
And it seems to be that.
I think we can probably even take it one step further back. Mm-hmm. Where I see the biggest miscommunication or the break in communication happening is purely in assumptions. There is a lot of assumed speech that happens in neurotypical speech patterns. And this is also a thing that happens in neurodivergent speech patterns. And it's where, I mean, you and I have had conversations where we're like, time out. What are you talking about?
Yes. Uh-huh.
And I have to back up because I said, I think that I'm thinking this, then you're thinking something different. And then we go, oh, no, that's not what I meant at all. Okay, well, let's go back and figure it out. But we know enough about each other and we've been friends long enough to be able to have that conversation to go, this doesn't sound like you.
Yeah.
What's going on here? But that sort of assumption, the neurotypical world is rife with, is it rife? Ripe? I don't know. It's both.
It's one of those. Yeah.
There's lots of it. It is overpopulated with many, many, many assumptions that societally people are just supposed to know. Which is fine if you're in the loop.
And I'm not in the loop.
Sometimes I am, but sometimes I'm not.
I'm totally like. Let me rephrase that, because there are some things now. I'm really astute at proxemics.
We had this conversation recently.
Yes. Like I love proxemics. Proxemics is the gateway for me to understanding certain social dynamics.
For those who don't know what that is, do you want to give an explanation?
Yeah. So how close two people are to each other, how many inches away, whether they make physical contact, whether you lean in and the other person leans back, or if the other person leans in when that person leans in. All of these sort of body language cues that I have picked up over the years because I am, in essence, face blind. Like, I cannot tell facial expressions. Like, you know, that the test that they do where they have all of those faces and you're supposed to say whether they're angry, upset, or happy. I fail. I get like 10%
I do
of them
really
right.
well at that one.
That's the worst for me.
Well, but at the same time, here's where it gets a little weird for me. So, like, I grew up with a lot of social expectations put on me and a lot of things that just based on the hobbies that I had kind of bridged the gap for me in a lot of those areas. So I have I have my degree in theater. I have to know how to read facial expressions. I have to know how to read body language because I have to reproduce body language in order to be able to act. So how much of that covered up for inadequacies that I may have on a neurodivergent level? I will never know that because I was taught that.
And on a side note, before we go any further, if you are a parent of a child who is neurodivergent, get them into theater.
It's so good for them.
Theater. Oh. Willow.
She stretched and clawed me.
She's Miss Sassy Pants
She
today,
is.
so
She
I
really
apologize in advance if she bites you. I can't control her.
Love bites. She doesn't mean it, but she just gets really aggressive in her love. Again, miscommunications and how things are conveyed. Willow's got it too. Nobody's immune.
So did you find yourself sort of called to theater because of that subconsciously maybe? Or
I started in theater, I think the way a lot of young kids start in theater. It seemed easier to solve somebody else's problems than my own.
Okay.
It was easier to be another person than to be me in whatever capacity that was.
Yeah.
Or more fun to be another person than me for that reason. And then I realized that through that language, I could access parts of me that I had a hard time conveying without that conduit. So one of the things you talk about in theater is this idea of drawing on your own experience. And so if I'm playing a character who's got some emotional upset, I'm having to find something within me that relates to that and put it out there. And so I'm connecting within those things and I'm cathartically like healing myself in the process by giving myself an outlet to the things that I could never say or do in person because of my own tripping over my own tongue or not being able to realize that that's the way I feel about it. Or, I'm also a verbal processor. So half the time I don't know what I think until I'm talking about it, which is always a little bit exciting.
And that's interesting that you say that. Because like before, so there's two me's. There's the me that was before my diagnosis and me after my diagnosis.
Okay.
And one of the things that happens, and I'm sure you can attest to it, is once you have that diagnosis and you finally have that sort of understanding of what label that they have applied to, there is this natural progression of going back through your life trying to make connections on previous
Apparently, neurotypicals don't do that, by the way.
See, that to me is
that backlog,
so strange.
That backlog, that's purely a neurodivergent thing. Nobody else does that but us, apparently.
And I spend hours doing that. And like one of the things that I realized is that for every job I did, I wasn't me. I was playing the role of who I thought would be best for that job.
You know what's interesting? I did that with relationships.
Oh, wow.
I can look back on some of the early relationships I had and be like, this is what I thought that person needed. And so that's who I was acting as in that time frame. It was a version of me, but it wasn't all of me because there's very few people that I feel and trust can handle all of me.
Yeah. And for me, it was always like, because like I didn't know what to do, but I guessed. So like when, for example, when I was the director of technology infrastructure for Seattle Science Foundation.
Craziest, like,
I know, right?
job history stuff.
But when
I was the neurosurgeon.
but when I was doing that, like what I did without even knowing it is I started watching videos
Mhm.
of people doing that kind of work, and that's the persona that I put up there.
Okay.
As opposed to this is me and I'm learning all this stuff. No, I have to play a role of somebody.
I think some of that naturally happens, but the way that we approach it is different. So, like, I would say that, if a neurotypical goes into a job that they know nothing about, they are learning, they're absorbing information from the things around them. They're doing something similar, but they're doing it from I'm just learning about this job kind of thing, as opposed to we're coming at it as I have to be a totally different version of myself while I'm here.
Yes,
And
every time.
I'm recreating this mask and I'm carving the eye holes out and I'm trying to say, okay, you got blue on yours, so I'll splash a little blue over here, and there's green over there, so I'm gonna put some green on it. And is this close enough? No? Okay, we'll put some, and kind of you're adjusting it as you go, but it's it's not you. It's not all of you anyway.
And it's the reason I would burn out.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely.
Like you would get to that point where sensory overload or autism burnout is there because you've just spent a year trying to be someone else. And
it's just not sustainable.
It's hard to take that off when you get home.
Yeah.
Like always would have because I'll even pick up accents. Like if I'm hanging out with somebody from Texas for a week and a half,
they always think
I
I'm
will
making
have
fun
Texas.
of them, and I'm like, I'm not. I really appreciate it, and I just can't help it. I'm sorry.
Mm-hmm.
I've gotten in so much trouble before.
You and me both. Like, wait, you didn't have a southern accent. I still don't, but I kicked that.
But I do when I'm with them. I don't know. It's part of that mimicry behavior.
Yeah.
It's part of that, that need to fit in, and it's I don't know that it's even conscious. We just kind of we mirror what we see. As a way to kind of stay safe sometimes.
Oh yeah, it's a life-saving philosophy, 100%. Like that, my ability to mimic has gotten me out of so many other possibly conflict situations.
Yeah.
And then another thing that I wanted to sort of work through in terms of that communication thing is, from what I hear, a lot of conflict between folks of certain neurodivergencies. I don't even know where I'm going with this. Let me try and rephrase this. Talk about autism moment.
That's where you go, stop. I'm going to try that again.
Yes. So right now we sort of touched a little bit about how you sort of found out where your divergency sort of started. When did you finally get your diagnosis?
I got my diagnosis when I was 18. Okay. When they diagnosed my mother. They would not have they wouldn't have looked at me at all had they not diagnosed her.
Okay.
I would have been one of those people that flied under the radar completely because I had acting skills.
Yeah.
And I could be what I needed to be. And you don't know until you start peeling back all these other layers. Then you can see some of those other things. I had a counseling session a couple of months ago where I was talking about some anxious thoughts I was having or whatever. And because I finally started some anxiety meds or whatnot. And the counselor goes, I had no idea that you had that intense of an anxious thought. I'm like, you never asked. And I knew the right answer, so I didn't say it because I knew that it didn't make any sense, but you didn't ask if I could navigate through it. I just assumed that if I could navigate through it, we didn't need to talk about it. But that doesn't mean that I wasn't having as super anxious thoughts that I had to work around every single day that was taking emotional bandwidth away from me.
And I'm glad you said it that way, because that seems to be a recurring theme in a lot of therapy.
You didn't ask, so I didn't say it. Was that a thing? Was I supposed to know that?
And it wasn't until I did this most recent switch of therapist that I realized just how big a deal that was. Because the therapist I have now is amazing and has this wealth of knowledge about autism that I don't even have as somebody with lived experience.
Yeah.
And just when I get into my session and I talk about life, he can predict how I've behaved or what I said or what I did based on the scenario or the situation. Um, and for the longest time, I never talked about most of the things that I talk with my therapist about because nobody asked before.
Well, and if it's your lived experience and you've been that way since day one, how do you know?
I thought everybody was that way.
Right? Doesn't everyone go back through their whole life every time they find something new about a friend and be like, wait, let me recatalog every interaction we've had since middle school. Let me just.
Doesn't everybody get
No.
thrown off in a grocery store when they see something that's not quite cereal, not quite granola?
That is oddly specific, but I know exactly what you mean. Or, that this isn't where this belongs. It used to be right here. Why is it over there now? You've completely rearranged my sorting capacity. You messed up my Dewey Decimal System of the grocery store.
And people don't understand that that's a thing.
Not to mention the lighting. Like, that's a whole other deal. That's a whole conversation we could have on our own, but.
And I told you about the thing with the lighting, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
About how it. So, for those of you who don't know, something interesting about lighting and people on the spectrum. When you have overhead lighting that is fluorescent in nature, because of the frequency that it puts out, it actually contracts and expands your pupils while you're in the store.
You're having a rave and you didn't even know it.
And so while if you're not affected by sensory overload, you may not even realize that it's happening. For those of us who do have sensory processing disorder, just that slight variation in the pupil contraction is enough to just want to scream and get out of the store. And I don't think people appreciate just how difficult that can be.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, when you have, like, a Walmart that does sensory days, it's like, that's awesome.
We keep a running list unofficially of stores that we go into, and we'll just get a text message, go, not this one.
Yep. Yep.
This one's okay. I went into a store down the road. Not that one. That one's not working. Do you have a problem in this specific store, too? Yes. Okay. God, it's not just me.
And part of me wonders if I picked up smoking just to get rid of a lot of smells.
That's the thought.
Because, like, I remember when I quit smoking, I instantaneously could never go into Bath and Body Works again.
Yeah, that one gives me a headache 9 days out of 10.
But when I was smoking, that sense was gone.
I think, given what I know of the stories you've told me before, I think it's, again, probably more of that mimicry behavior.
Oh, yeah.
But it might be a nice side perk at the time. Yeah. Don't start smoking. It's not good for you.
No.
We're not condoning it. We're not saying it's a good idea.
I quit in 2004 for a reason.
Yeah.
Don't do it. It's not worth it. It's nasty. Anyway.
The sensory component really is something that people don't think about. I was telling you this story earlier today, and I'll tell it again for those who are watching and listening. Moving is stressful. I don't know if anyone has moved recently. It's stressful. There's a lot that happens. And even though I thought I was fine, my body was not fine. There were about 3 days last week where I couldn't wear shoes, which is a weird thing to have be an issue, but I couldn't wear shoes. Every time I wore shoes, I felt like my spine was crawling out of my back.
Yeah.
And it had nothing to do with my feet. My feet weren't hurting. There was no like pressure or there, but something about having shoes on was making my whole sensory system just overload. And so at one point I was taking a little break time nap, just closing my eyes, resting my eyes, and I kicked my shoes off and I went, that's what it was. It's been the shoes this whole week. That was the problem. My feet didn't want shoes on. But you think it could tell me it didn't want shoes on? No. It's like trying to fix your printer.
Yeah. And I think that's where this idea of dyspraxia comes in.
Yeah.
Where your body sends mixed signals. Mm-hmm. Where, like, you get, like, I have a pain here, and in reality, it's something happening here. Mm-hmm. It's like 6 inches off. It's a weird phenomenon.
I have an overactive nervous system, and so I actually have like vagus nerve symptoms that happen because my nervous system is just a little bit too electrified 9 times out of 10. And so it comes with gut symptoms. It comes with, there's some days where I get really dizzy and feel like I'm going to pass out, but I don't. There's days where I wonder if I'm having a stroke or a heart attack, and it's just my nervous system. having a temper tantrum. And I have to sit there and go, wait, is this, am I really having a heart attack? Or am I, oh, nope, something gurgled in my tummy and the feeling went away. Okay, it's just my nervous system again. But most people aren't aware of their nervous system and their, like, what their stomach is doing, like that level of bodily awareness, which is weird because we also have dyspraxia.
Yeah.
I always get them confused. Dyspraxia, so we can't tell where it's coming from, but we also have hyper awareness of body. So, like, sometimes I can feel my heart beating in times that I shouldn't be able to feel my heart beating. Sometimes I can feel like stuff digesting, and I'm like, that's not information I need, brain.
Yeah.
Please feel free to get rid of that one. Nope, gonna hang on to it. Great. Thanks.
And you never know when it's going to get over it or when it's going to come.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So you can wake up one day, have every intention of, going to your friend's baby shower, and you woke up today, and all of a sudden you can feel all the skin on your feet.
And then when that happens for me, I just want to crawl into a corner of a dark room. And
you have to cut out all the other sensory things to compensate. So if you have one hot spot, you have to shut down as many other things as we've talked about this, about shutting down sensory issues.
Yeah, I can't exist with all 5 senses on at the same time.
Yeah, which is fascinating to me because I wish I had control to be able to turn them off. But
yeah. So usually it's the sense of smell is usually the one I turn off. It's a useless one.
Unless you need it.
or when it's overwhelming and then like, because it also depends. So, like, if I'm in a moment of, so tell me if you ever heard this one.
Okay.
Right. You're in a moment of intense focus. Somebody asked you a question. You heard it.
I'm already irritated.
You hear the question.
Yeah.
You're not able to respond, and so you say, what? Mm-hmm. But I know the question, so I'm not asking you to repeat the question. It's just literally that's what my brain says until 20 seconds go by and I finally process the question that you were asking.
That's a delayed processing, and it's definitely something that's on. I know it's on the symptom list for ADHD. It might be for autism too. But
I have that in spades.
Oh, it used to irritate my folks so much when I was growing up because I would say what, and then before they could even start to repeat the question, I would answer it, and they're like, why did you ask me to say it again if you were just going to answer it? I'm like, well, it took me a half a second for my brain to catch up. Mm-hmm. At the same time, though, I also have the opposite sometimes, where have you ever been with a slow talker?
No.
Other ADHD people, help me out on this one. If you've ever been with a slow talker and your brain is going faster than their mouth is, oh, it's agony. Oh, it's torture.
Is that like a pacing thing? Somebody
it's
who's
just
speaks at a slower pace?
Or they're trying to think of a word, or they're trying to, and you're like, can we play charades? Because I got like 50 of these and we're coming out with them. We jokingly call it, ADHD charades at my house. So one of my family members will be like, hey, can you pass me the, and they forgot the word. And so I'm like, cat, refrigerator, remote control. You want the, what? I'm just going to start naming stuff I can see now. And we play ADHD charades. And so if you're with somebody who's taking a long time to get the story out and you know where they're going and you know already what's going to come, like, and you're just like, can you finish that? What happens then is my brain will start filling in pieces for you because it's already moved on to the next thing. And so there are times when I will hear things that you didn't say because my brain got tired of waiting for you to get it out. And usually it's like half a millisecond, right? It's that quick. But my brain will hear things and I'm like, hold up, time out, go back. Did you just say blah, 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 blah? And they're like, no. I was like, okay, that's what I thought. Because that didn't make, why are we talking about pickles? Where did those come from? And it's something that my brain filled in because it was like, yes, clearly this is the answer of where they're going.
And do you have problems with like code switching too?
It depends. Depends on how tired I am.
So for those of you who may not know, code switching is the ability to switch between processes in your brain.
Or languages, if you will.
Yeah. So like, for example, the reason I struggle with interviews is because each question is a code. And to switch between question 1 and question 2, my brain needs time in between, but I can't take that time in between during the interview. And then I also need time in between the questions and then me asking questions back, which I also don't get.
I do sometimes in that instance, but not always. And so the best way that I've come up with words to describe this is if I'm in change mode, then I don't have that problem. If I'm in stability mode, then I do.
I can get that.
So, like, let's say you and I plan an outing for a day,
Yeah.
right? And we have no plans. We're just going to hang out.
Yeah. No problem.
Like usual, right?
Yeah.
But if plans come up and change, we have to be late, some doctor called, whatever, no problem. We didn't have any real plans other than we're going to hang out, we're going to wing it. However, if we have plans like, okay, we're making Thanksgiving dinner and we're going to start at 10 and it's going to go to here and this person's bringing this, and this, and we've planned it all out and I've got the grocery list and we've done everything else and someone comes in and goes, well, what if we switched this? No, absolutely not.
What do you mean you forgot the butter?
Absolutely not. Get out. Like and that's what I mean though. If I'm in change mode where I haven't locked anything into place,
yeah,
then I'm fine. But if I'm not expecting change and I feel like we have already locked this into place and all of a sudden now there's all these variables thrown in, I can get really irritable.
Yeah. Or if we've made a decision
and now we're going back to talk about it again.
Yeah.
It's not just to like because I mean, sometimes you'd be like, okay, I just need to talk this through one more time. Okay, well, now I know we need to switch back into change mode. That's fine.
Yeah.
But don't come in all of a sudden cold and after we've decided something and hashed it out for 4 hours or whatever.
I think I'm going to change my mind.
I think I want the chicken instead. We just fixed this. And it's that need to have to switch or the need to be flexible versus stable is kind of, or rigid, I guess, is what I think of. And so if I know that I need to be in flexibility mode, then I can be very flexible. However, if you need me to be flexible and I'm already in rigid mode,
that's different.
That's totally different. And I'm going to get really grumpy and I'm not going to do a very good job in that instance. I'm probably going to be really irritable because I was thinking we already had this locked and loaded and ready to go.
Right, because then I have to go back and again, like I stated before,
go back and reanalyze everything. Yeah. And so it has to do with, for me, it's emotional labor.
Right.
Because, you just think you're adding something to the pile, not you personally, the collective you. It thinks, hey, I found this extra quarter. I'm going to just add it to the piggy bank. And I'm going, I just like audited the piggy bank and now I have to open it all up again, take everything out because you don't remember whether it was a quarter or 2 dimes and a nickel, and it makes a difference.
A huge difference.
Right? And so that's what it is. And so it's that emotional labor for me of, okay, now I have to reopen it up, go through everything again, find the piece that you put in, and it's not as simple as just tossing it in the mix.
Yeah.
And so for a neurotypical, they think, well, I just added 2 more cents. No, it makes a huge difference.
What's the big deal?
It's a big deal. It's a big deal, We added $1. Okay, was it a dollar bill? Was it quarters? Was it nickels? Was it pennies? What did you put in?
Because
silver dollar?
I know how much weight capacity is in that darn piggy bank.
Mm-hmm. Or what it's capable of.
Shifted the weight ratio.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, it changes things that people aren't thinking of. And they think, well, I just threw it in. I was just trying to be generous. It's not helpful. It's not always helpful.
And another analogy that you had the other time, that was a while back.
Oh, I use so many.
That I appreciate was the train.
I love the train analogy.
Yeah.
So I use this analogy quite a bit have you ever heard the phrase too many irons in the fire or too many things going on? For my brain, what that looks like is it's like I'm Grand Central Station and there are trains going out in every which direction. And I know that I have scheduled trains coming in, and keeping a conversation subject open is like asking me to hold a train at the station and just hold on to the caboose with my hand. And you're asking me to hold on to it while it's trying to take off, and you've given me like 6 of those, and I got 4 trains coming in that need those spots, and
you only have 3 arms.
I don't know where that third one came from, but I only have 3 arms, and they're wearing out of strength really fast. And so it's that idea of I see this a lot with relationships, is where this conversation usually comes up, is the idea of when I don't know where I stand with somebody on a relation level, it's like holding so many possibilities open at the same time, because I have to hold the possibility open that maybe we're just friends. Or maybe I have to hold the possibility open that they don't like me at all. Or maybe I have to hold the possibility open that it's more than that. And so I'm holding all three of these trains at the station because I don't want to send anyone out prematurely. And so I'm asking them all to just sit there and run their engines and waste fuel. And it's exhausting.
Yeah. Something just occurred to me as you were talking there too. Because like I remember my entire life, I always felt like I didn't understand why people liked me. I didn't understand why people wanted to hang out with me.
That's fair.
And I didn't understand, like, I always thought I wasn't good enough.
I just second guess it, but yeah, I get that.
And I always, just even now, like when I meet people or I talk to people, I always have that default narrative in the back of my mind that says,
It's because of the masking.
is that what it is?
Because it goes, do you really like me, or do you just like the face I have on?
Yeah.
Do you like my mirroring of you? Do you like you? Is that what you like, and you're seeing you in me?
Yeah.
And that's why you like me, because I'm showing you part of you that you like?
Is that kind of where imposter syndrome comes in?
A little bit.
Yeah.
I mean, imposter syndrome is I don't know enough about it to be able to quote on it, but I would imagine it's very similar of this idea of, I'm not who they think I am.
Yeah. Yeah.
When you're masking, which again, I assume most folks know by now, but if we're masking, we are being a slightly more functional version of ourselves, or a more societally acceptable version of ourselves, or we're showing a limited view of who we are.
Oh, 100%.
And it's taxing to hold the rest of that back, and it's taxing to have to fit into that outfit every day. And the question I always have is do you like me, or do you like who I am when I'm with you?
And I've never had enough courage to ask that question. Surprisingly enough.
I have in relationships before.
Yeah.
Where my statement is, I will never be somebody's somebody.
What do you mean by that?
There are people in the world who just need somebody. I am not just somebody. So I will never be somebody's somebody. You need to be able to show me that it's me, not just the role that I fill in your life.
Yeah, I get that.
Because I can fill a lot of roles and I can do a lot of things, but show me that you can handle all of me, and that it's me that you like, not just what I can do for you, or the role I can fill, or the mask that I can wear, or the...
And I'm so used to being in relationships. Somebody.
Mm-hmm.
And this the first time I can think of in my life where I'm like, I'm not doing that again.
Yeah. My biggest test for that is, okay, if you take me out of the picture, whatever relationship it is, friendship, whatever, if you take me out of the picture and you put in a stunt double, does anybody notice? And if the answer is no, then I don't need to be here.
How would somebody not notice?
I dated somebody for a while who just loved the idea of having somebody to date. They wanted someone to snuggle with. They wanted someone to come home to. They wanted someone to... It had nothing to do with me.
Okay.
There were perks about it that had to do with me. But literally, if you took me out of that equation and put any other human being in there that did the similar things, they would be just as content. So at that point, I felt like a security blanket, not a partner in a dating relationship.
And they're not really embracing uniqueness or what makes you as a human.
Yeah.
They
They just needed somebody. And so I will not be somebody's somebody.
I get that.
Because what that makes me do then is it forces me to fill a role. And again, that's just another mask.
Yeah. And don't get me started on autism and dating.
It's neurodivergency in dating.
That's true. Uh-huh.
Because let me tell you, when you start dating somebody and your need to understand exactly where you stand on a relationship level, because again, that whole train analogy, and you start asking somebody how they feel about you after like 1 or 2 dates and they take off because you just scared them to death.
Yeah.
Or needing to kind of recap it because our ability to absorb in the moment was tapped out. And so now I don't remember exactly what the full date looked like because I remember bits and pieces of it. But, it was a live performance at that point, and so I can't remember exactly what happened. Come on, Willa. She wasn't feeling enough attention. She's so cute. But it's
weird because like the thing that I'm running into time and time again is the minute with the exception if the person is also neurodivergent, then it's not a thing. If they're not neurodivergent,
it's less of a thing.
And you say that you are, there's like zero chance of me getting anywhere. It's really
most
strange.
times.
Just in general. Since I've been down this dating path.
Yeah.
And I don't think people understand just how difficult it is for people who are different to date.
Autism still has the stigma of needing to be cared for.
Yeah.
It still has that, people are non-vocal or they're is it non-verbal? Is that the right term right now? And that they will need care. They're non-speaking. That's the one. I was like, I know it's not non-verbal, but I can't remember what it is. That they are going to need hand-holding. And a lot of people don't want to, especially adults in the dating sphere, don't want another person to take care of. Especially women. A lot of women, especially as they start to get older, they're like, I don't need one more child to take care of. And so I think there's still that, what's happening is there's still that stigma and misconception that you would need to be cared for in that capacity, and you don't.
Right.
You are a full functioning human being, just differently functioning than the neurotypical.
Yeah, I'm just a little out there.
Yeah. A little bit to the left.
A little bit.
It's fine. It's just a little bit to the left. And I don't have the same problem with it for ADHD when I say I'm ADHD.
Yeah.
My words are hard sometimes, y'all. Mostly, that's the word we'll go with, mostly because they think that just means that I'm forgetful and that I'm a little bit spastic. That I'm going to jump topics a lot, And so there's still misconceptions, but they don't show up immediately. The autism judgment shows up right there.
Yeah, and there's no ADHD.
Oh, no, there is.
There's no ADHD love shows where they exploit people with ADHD in a matchmaking service like they do with autism.
I would wager that there is. It's just called something different.
That's fair.
Because I've seen some shows that I'm like, that person is got some uncontrolled ADHD, and they're just capitalizing on it for television.
But what I'm saying is, like, you have these shows.
Yeah, I know which one you're talking
Love
about.
on the Spectrum and some of these other shows out there that have a very narrow idea of what autism is. Mm-hmm. And if you don't fit that precise narrative, they don't even have you on the show.
Well, yeah.
And it's
because that's not where they get their money from.
Yeah. And so like they're missing out on all of these people that, like if I had $1 for everybody for a time that everybody told me that I don't look autistic, like what?
Thanks.
Yeah. Right. I still to this day like
I have a little autism in my teeth. What?
Mm-hmm. Like what does it mean? But anyway.
Oh, should I be more XYZ?
Right. Should I flop in your face a little more?
Mm-hmm. Here you go. Please just walk up to someone and like wave your hand in their face.
Don't mind me, I'm stimming.
I have boundary issues. Great, thanks. But at the same time, like this conversation of when the stigma comes into play, right?
Yeah.
So for ADHD, there is still a misconception, but the misconception is, oh, you're just going to be a little bit forgetful. You're going to be a little bit, messy. You're going to be a little bit this. And they have no idea the other complexities that get thrown in there that then become a huge problem later when I warned you ahead of time that I have ADHD, which means I'm going to have dysregulated moods. I'm going to have anxiety. I'm going to need you to talk me through some things sometimes. And most people are like, well, I don't want to do that kind of work. Well, I told you ahead of time and you said, no, that's not a big deal, but you didn't know what it was. And so it's the same, but on the flip side, right? Yeah. You're getting people who go, oh, I don't want to invest in that. And they pull out immediately. Whereas I get people who go, yeah, no, it's not a big deal. And then 2 months later, they go, I don't want to do that. I done told you at the beginning, that this was part of the deal. And it's interesting where it comes in.
Yeah.
It's also interesting because that same sort of, kind of bringing it around full circle, that same sort of hobby issue that we were talking about earlier, where I work on a hobby and then suddenly I get bored.
Yeah.
I've gotten bored of people before.
Yeah. I have to.
Where all of a sudden I'm like, you're not interesting anymore. I don't have anything to learn from you anymore. You've stopped growing. There's nothing, there's no other adventures we can have together. I'm now bored. And it sounds so horrible, and I don't mean it that way, but like, it's the truth. I've gotten to a point where, and again, it's that same sort of light switch. You wake up one day and you go, it's not doing it anymore.
Yeah.
And that's terrifying. Absolutely terrifying. It terrifies me because it makes me wonder, honestly, if I'm being vulnerable, it makes me wonder if I will ever have a successful long-term relationship, or if I'm always doomed to wake up someday and just not have it there anymore. Which is one of the reasons I don't use the word love very often in that capacity.
Okay.
I don't use the word like falling in love. I say I choose to love.
I can respect that.
Because love for me is a choice. I am choosing to invest in a person, in an interaction, in a relationship, because I can't always guarantee that I'm going to wake up in the morning and I'm going to feel it.
Oh, interesting.
Because some days I don't. Some days I don't like you very much. But that doesn't mean that I don't still love you as a brother, that I don't still, like, we get on each other's nerves occasionally. Everybody does, right?
Yeah.
And so if I'm just going based on feeling, I can't guarantee that my moods are going to stay stable enough for me to stay in some kind of, labeled whatever. And so instead, I don't say things like, oh, I'm falling in love. No, I'd say I choose to love. So if I say I love you, it's because I've made a choice. I've made a conscious action that I am going to care about your well-being, even if you don't.
That's interesting. Because I'm kind of like the opposite.
Okay.
Like, feelings are what drives me.
It's what drives me too, and I've had to make this conscious choice.
Gotcha.
Because if I just base everything on feeling, I'd be all over the board.
And for me, there's only so many emotions that I actually feel.
That's fair.
So like, anger is not an emotion that I feel.
Me neither.
Yeah.
I refused.
I've never been angry. I've been frustrated.
Yeah. Miffed.
Really frustrated.
Yeah.
But I've never been angry. I've never used the word I hate because I don't know what hate is.
I have, but I've used it in a colloquial term.
Yeah.
But yeah. Not in a.
Same.
Yeah. Not
Same.
in a.
Mm-hmm. But when I look back at it, like hate is not.
This is the whole. This is the whole other side conversation. But I have this concept that within myself, just in the way I understand emotion, which again is limited to my own perspective.
Yeah.
Is that anger is the only non-serving emotion. It is the only emotion that doesn't have a focal point.
Or purpose.
It can have a purpose. It can have a purpose, but it doesn't have a focal point. It has a radius damage.
Yes.
And so the problem with anger that I see is it's not, you can't steer it. If you're angry, you are angry in a maximum radius around yourself, and whoever just happens to fall in that is going to feel the brunt of it. Which is one of the reasons anger is the only emotion that terrifies me.
Yeah.
Because it's uncontrollable, it's uncontrolled, and it doesn't have, you can't pick and choose. It's like a volcano.
It must suck to not be able to control the flow of that volcano.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, and I will admit I've never dealt with an anger problem, so I don't have that perspective to be able to talk from.
Maybe both, actually.
So I can't speak from that. And then someone might come in and say, hey, I have dealt with anger issues, and here's my experience of it, and that's great. And I'd love to hear that perspective, actually, but it's not one that I have. Every time I've seen anger, though, it is lack of emotional control. It is lack of emotional direction. It's like dropping a bomb
Yeah.
in a space. It has a maximum radius. And anyone in that radius gets various levels of caught up in it. Um, and that's not to say other emotions can't do that too. Depression sometimes can be a vortex, suck people in. But it's also not terribly difficult to experience depression or sadness and not have it affect everybody else. Whereas I've seen very few people be able to actually harness anger in a way that doesn't affect someone in that vicinity.
And as someone who has struggled with depression in the past,
Same.
It's definitely more internal, but it also has its impacts external.
In things like apathy, though. In things like lack of focus on a partner. It can still affect other people, but
yeah, because for me it was a lack of focus on everything. Yeah. It was just like I don't want to do anything, and the weird part about the whole the depression thing and wanting it to stop, it was never that I didn't want to be alive. I just wanted all of the sensory stuff to stop. And this was before I knew I was autistic, where I would just get into these sensory overload things and have no idea what was going on.
Not sure how to get back out.
Not sure how to get back out.
Everything is on fire, essentially, inside. And
I don't want to talk to anybody, deal with anybody. I don't want to work anymore. Yeah. I just want to quit everything and crawl in a hole and not escape.
Yeah. I have other fears that have kept me through with my battles of depression, not doing anything too majorly harmful. But I definitely have felt those things similarly as well. And it's I used to do a lot of writing at that time. And I used to do a lot of writing of poetry and things like that. And words are my thing. If you know anything about me, it's that the joke is right that all autistics are obsessed with numbers. I'm obsessed with words. That's my version of the same thing. And so I love putting words together in puzzles and things like that. And so I had written this poem about trying to reach the top of the water and being able to get your hand above it, but not your mouth. And that's what I feel like a lot of depression is like. Is like I can splash around, but it doesn't really matter because what I need is below the water. And a lot of neurodivergent people struggle with anxiety. They struggle with depression because our ability to feel things is either on or off.
Yeah.
It's either set at a 0 or it's set at like a 25. And there's nothing in between.
And I have another theory too. Like it's hard to exist without anxiety when on a daily basis you're reminded about how different you are than everyone else.
Yeah.
So when you go through your entire existence thinking you're on the wrong planet, it's hard not to have anxiety.
Sure. They have added recently, I know at least to the ADHD list in the DSM-5, they've added in that anxiety and depression are symptoms now of ADHD because poorly managed ADHD will give you both depression and anxiety.
Same with autism.
And it's very much so, and not even just of having that portion, but also having to wear a mask all the time, having to consciously be aware of things that your brain doesn't want to focus on, but knowing that if you don't put a pin in that for a second.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna stop mid-sentence because I'm neurodivergent and I can. So put a pin in that one. The idea though is that I started taking anti-anxiety meds not that long ago because I actually found out that genetically I have a anxiety issue that needs dealing with. And it's familial. A lot of women on one side of my family have it. And so it wasn't until I started taking anti-anxiety meds that I realized how much my anxiety covered for my neurodivergency.
Interesting.
So my anxiety had kept me on top of things that I otherwise would not have been on top of. And so when I started taking these medications, I had to relearn in a lot of ways how to like be on time for work, for example. I went from being 15 minutes early to like every day, which is very typical, to like coming in at the last nanosecond because my brain's understanding of time was not being kicked into shape by my anxiety every day. So, and that's that whole concept of, is it a problem? People taking neurodivergency tests. Is this a problem? No, I have a system. Okay, if you have a system, then you have a problem that needs to be worked on.
Oh, I know. And the weird part is that I didn't realize how much sleep I lost because of anxiety until I figured out I had anxiety. Like I always thought it was normal, like that people didn't sleep before a flight. But I didn't sleep before a flight, not because I'm afraid of flying. I actually love flying. I love the feeling of taking off and landing. I just love that sensation. I hate the airport so much that I can't sleep the night before unless I have medication because I'm so afraid that I'm going to miss my flight. Even if I'm there 3 hours, 4 hours early.
2 days early, right?
Yeah.
That's it's those weird sort of, and that's illogical, right? We know that's completely nonsense.
Yeah. Doesn't change.
Doesn't matter. Doesn't change the fact that like I can talk through this all day long and I can go, I know this doesn't make any sense. But and I don't know how many people have ever watched The Hunger Games. But one of the second, third movie, I don't remember. There's a part where one of the characters asks, well, I can't tell what's real and what's not. How do I know? Well, do what Annie does. She asks. Yeah. And she trusts that the people around her who love her are going to tell her what's right or wrong. And it's this little clip, and it's not even a big part of the movie, but I loved that part so much because with my anxiety, with everything else, that's what I've started doing in my friendships, in my relationships, because my brain's not very nice sometimes. Yeah. My internal monologue.
Oh, mine is
super bitchy sometimes. Yeah. Not really my friend.
Yeah.
It's almost to the point that I should like give it its own name and be like, okay, sit down, But like you can tell that it's not your normal narrative voice. And when that starts to kick up or that inner critic starts to kick in. And when that happens, I've been able to kind of, with a lot of therapy work actually, been able to go, okay, before I fall into this rumination rabbit hole, I'm going to just stop and ask. Because I could sit here and think, well, what if they hate me? What if they don't like me anymore? What if everyone doesn't think I'm a... And I could go, wait. Or I could just ask and trust that the person cares enough about me to tell me how it really is. You've gotten text messages like that from me. Yep. Okay, I know I probably know the answer to this, and you're going to be like, why on earth would you think that? But I just need to silence my internal monologue. Would you answer this question? And it's usually like, where did you get that from? I'm like, I know, I just... Help me out.
And the funny part of that whole scenario is I asked that question because I really want to know where it went off the rails, and you want to know where you went off the rails, and most of the time we meet in the middle.
Yeah. Oh, okay. I see where you got that. Yeah. Oh, you were coming from. Oh, and see, I took a left, and
or when I say right when I mean left.
Yeah. That's why I say take it this way.
Yeah.
Because it's that one. I think it's just left. I don't have trouble with right and left. I just have trouble with left. So why left is so hard. Just left, though.
I'll mix up random words all the time. All the time.
Yeah. It's the you know what I mean. It's
fine. Or I forget a word. It's like, oh, come on.
Sometimes that game is fun, though.
Sometimes.
That's where we've joked. For any of you that know us personally, we joke about the idea that every autistic needs an ADHD and vice versa because it's a really nice balance.
To make sense of the world.
Yeah, because each can translate in ways that the other can't.
Yeah.
So I can read the word portion where that's not something like the subtleties in writing, that's not your strength. You had to remind me of some proxemics that I just completely didn't even recognize. this weekend, and I was like, what are you talking about? Because I was busy looking at their face, not about the rest of them. And just so like it's this weird sort of partnership that we've kind of created within our friendship of, okay, how do you read this? Are you reading something different into this? And it's also interesting because we do that a little bit when it comes to some gender stereotypes too.
Oh yeah.
What does this mean from like the male perspective? And again, everything's a spectrum, so this isn't speaking for all people because we can't, right? But this is talking stereotypes exist because enough people have similar experiences, right?
Yeah. Like there's some I always like to call them sort of universal truths, where more often than not, this is a true representation of what it is or what an example is.
Yeah.
And that way, I leave room for those exceptions.
Yeah.
Because there's always an exception. Because, like I've said more than a million times already, like not even identical twins have the same story.
Yeah.
So, like, you can't tell unless you ask.
But there's conversations we'll have about, okay, well, what does this mean from a male perspective? Oh, that's not what that means from a female perspective at all.
Yeah. Uh-huh. That is definitely true.
We'll have whole conversations where we're both sitting there going, interesting.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Why would you do that? Why would you do that? Because this is so much easier. That doesn't make a bit of sense.
And that seems to be the sticking point, right? It's when things don't make sense that the frustration sets in. Because it should make sense.
Mm-hmm.
And the part that the frustration for me, in terms of figuring out people, is that there is no 100% universal truth.
Mm-hmm. How about this one? Have you had the one yet where you are trying to figure out the logic that person used and they think you're questioning their authority?
All the time. All the time. Yeah. All the time.
You're like, hey, why did you make this choice? I'm not questioning you. I just am genuinely curious as to the reason behind why you made this choice so that I can understand why you made it. Well, what does it matter? Now they're all defensive. I'm like, just wanted to know why you picked up the green paint can.
And I want to know so I don't fall through that same experience. I question, like, why did you make this decision? Because if it's a wise decision and I know the why, then I'll make that decision the next time. But if you tell me the why,
I just want to know the logic.
And it doesn't make sense and the logic is flawed, then I can go, I'm not going to do that next time.
Otherwise, all I have is just proof that you made a decision.
Yeah. And the part that surprises me, for most people, that's okay. For people who are neurodivergent, it's like, I really
need to know. Well, that's that need for details and the need to. And I mean, part of you could probably argue. I don't know if this is true or not. You could probably argue that like having to completely code switch every single day for the rest of your life causes you to really dig into the details because it is a foreign language to you, and you are. She's snoring. And then it's a foreign language to you, and so therefore you are trying to understand these grammatical terms, so to speak, of a language that is not your native one.
And a language that isn't written down.
Uh-huh.
It's not in words. It's not in paragraphs. It's not in any code that I can see.
We had this conversation about 3 days ago, I think. We were talking about sighing as a form of calming the vagus nerve and calming your nervous system, which is going. Mm-hmm. And I do that sometimes. It helps. It really does help. If you have anxiety, just take a big old breath, hold it for half a second, and you'll be amazed at how much it just kind of starts your body in that process of relaxing. We hold our breath and we don't realize it. Another story entirely. But my anxiety tells me that only happens when a person's frustrated. And I know that is not true because I also sigh to release tension. And so sometimes when you or I are in the same space and you sigh and I go, tension release, or are you frustrated? And you're like, tension release. Great, just checking.
Yeah, oddly enough, I don't sigh for the other. I only sigh for tension release.
Yeah, but it's weird because people, that sort of like exasperated sigh.
A waste of a sigh.
Well, it's a waste of energy. It's a waste of energy. In theater, actually, we have to train that out of people because you throw away energy you could put into your scene.
That makes sense.
You see a lot of people go up and acting and they go, when they're trying to get the words out. And what they're doing is their body is naturally responding to the amount of tension they're feeling and trying to get rid of it. And you have to train yourself out of it because it doesn't read very well on stage. Fun fact to know and tell. But if you are doing that sort of exasperated sigh in conversations with people, they're going to think you're frustrated. And so it's really interesting to have to be like, I'll do that at my house sometimes. And my family's like, what's wrong? Nothing. I just had too much air. I was holding my breath. I needed to get it out. I don't know. I was tense. Now I'm not. End of story. Well, are you okay? Yeah, I'm fine.
Don't think I've ever had that experience with my family. But my family's
That's a whole other story. We could have a
other
whole
podcast.
Yep.
Yeah.
But it does make me ask the question though, as much as you're comfortable asking it, about people that we can recognize the neurodivergent traits in that haven't figured it out themselves yet.
This is a lot.
People don't always like it when you let them know that.
They don't.
They usually don't like it.
Here's the thing, and there's no getting around this, because
you have to wait for them to discover it.
Well, no, it's not only that. So I have a pattern recognition in my brain.
All right.
Right?
You, the autistic, has a pattern recognition in your brain.
No, right?
What?
Unheard of. But I have this pattern recognition in my brain for other people who are neurodivergent.
Uh-huh.
And they have to meet a certain level of criteria in my patterns before I start really seriously thinking that they might be neurodivergent.
Is it apologizing before we even get to the subject of what we're talking about?
That's a part of it.
I'm going to explain this to you, and I'm sorry it's going to sound like this, but here's the context of why I need to explain this topic so that I can get to the point so that we can actually have the topic. And you go, I wonder if this person has a little bit of neurodivergency going.
For me, it's usually talking to somebody and they're complaining about a situation.
Uh-huh.
And when I see that the level of frustration, that's something that would be typical of a neurodivergent person.
So you're noticing the emotional intensity because we feel everything to like an 11.
Yes, the emotional intensity, the sensory intensity, and I look for key words that people need.
I noticed along those lines is I get more irritated at small inconveniences than I do at major changes.
100%.
It's one of my biggest neurodivergent things that I noticed, like end of the world probably would be fine. I'd handle it in stride. Like you change the thermostat and I'm super grumpy.
Yeah.
That 2 degrees, that minor inconvenience is a bigger shift to my brain than some giant change because I have a built-in sort of, survival system that will kick in for a giant change, but I don't have any coping skills for minor inconvenience.
I can relate to that.
You're the thing.
And the interesting part about the pattern recognition piece, though, is once they've met a certain number of criteria, then I'll start to consider whether I tell them or not.
Right.
And right now, I've done this 35 times.
Yeah.
And I'm 100%
I was one of
accurate.
them, by the way.
100% accurate.
Yeah.
Every time.
Yeah.
So I'm waiting for myself to be wrong once.
Autism DAR, is that what we're going to call it?
Maybe. Yeah.
It's ADAR. ADAR.
Yeah. There you go. Yeah. Yeah. Uh-huh.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Or it could be neurodivergent DAR, NDAR.
Yeah. And
NDAR. But no, it's interesting. And the other thing is that there are statistics that show that neurodivergents tend to flock together because we feel marginally more accepted and we don't have to mask as much. You're like, oh, you speak the same weird language that I do. It's great.
Well, and there's a reason I do the 2 support groups.
Yeah.
Right? And it's because inevitably, in a group like, even if it's like 3 people and we're all neurodivergent, after an hour of conversation, there's at least 2 or 3 examples of where it validates that you're not the only one who thinks a certain way or reacts a certain way.
What's interesting in those conversations is when you have moments of discovery, of realizing not only does somebody else think that way, but that we all think that way, and that's not normal.
Yeah. Yeah.
One of the best stories I have, and it's anxiety related because that's been my most recent thing, is one of my family members went to the doctor and they were asking how some recent anxiety medication worked. And they said, it's fine, but I can't feel my heart anymore. And the doctor went, what? Like, well, yeah, I can't feel, my chest feels numb, is what they said. And it took about a session or two for the doctor to realize that that family member had been actively feeling their heartbeat for the majority of their life. And this anxiety medication that finally worked for them gave them the ability to ignore that, and their body interpreted it as their chest being numb.
Interesting.
So you don't know sometimes what you don't know because you don't know what's normal because you've been living with it your whole life. Like, what do you mean everybody doesn't sit there while they're eating food and go, what happens if I choke right now?
All right. Here's an interesting one.
Apparently that's not normal either.
So if you're outside
Mm-hmm.
and the sun's out
Yes.
and you close your eyes,
Yes.
do your eyes get brighter?
They're more intense.
So if I'm here right now and I close my eyes, it's dark. It's black.
It's not black for me, but it's darker.
But if
Darker.
I'm outside in the sunshine, even in the shade, and I close my eyes, after about 20 seconds, it starts to feel like I'm staring at the sun. And I have to open my eyes.
Interesting.
Because I can't keep my eyes closed and look at the sky. And I always wondered if that was just me or...
I think I would put it in different words, but I have gone out into the sunshine and closed my eyes, and closing it was actually more intense than having them open. Because now not only was there glaring heat and intensity, but I put it directly over my eyeball as opposed to having some distance there. It's like it like the energy was captured in my eyelid and it was just too intense. So similar, but not quite the same. But that would make me think that maybe you're onto something there.
Yeah.
I do know that neurodivergency changes how quickly your pupils can contract and dilate.
Yeah, it's way easier for me to go adjust from light to dark than dark to light.
It goes one way. I can almost see in the dark.
Yeah.
I get out in the sunshine in the middle of winter and I'm like, I can't.
Yeah.
I wear sunglasses all year long.
Yeah.
I go outside at all, I have to put my sunglasses on because I can't see. And it's not just like, oh, I'm inconvenient, I can't see for a couple seconds. No, it's like for like 4 hours, I can't see anything. And I'm like, I can't. Like I'm squinting and then my whole head hurts afterwards. And my eyes don't go that way.
Interesting.
But they adjust to dark really, really well. I'm the person as well. You come into the house, like you come to my current house, you're like, why is it so dark in here?
Yeah.
I'm like, I didn't even notice.
Yeah.
Because my eyes adjusted. I can see just fine.
And I don't like this place because if you turn the lights out, it's still bright.
I just don't like overhead lighting. We have conversations about the big light. We don't turn on the big light. I want to bounce light off the walls, not have it directly like in my eyeball.
I've replaced every light bulb in here.
Oh, there you go.
So every light bulb in here is full spectrum. So they add that extra layer.
The irony.
I know, right?
The irony in the terminology.
But that also says, like, for those of you who have light sensitivity, they do make these things called full spectrum lighting. So normal light or diffused light only is a part of the spectrum of the light. So they have special lights like these that are full spectrum that add the reds, add the blues, and it's much easier.
It's a little bit more like daylight.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah.
I know there are certain frequencies, certain stores specifically that have certain types of LEDs that I walk in there and I cannot. I've worn sunglasses in a grocery store before. I've used those little like earplugs. I don't want to brand promote, but the little earplugs that help block out sound specifically.
Yeah.
Because there are certain stores that I walk into and I'm instant sensory overload. And 9/10 of it has to do with the lighting. A lot of times when I'm feeling sensory overload, my ability to handle light gets lessened and my ability to handle sound gets lessened, or that what I'm able to work with gets smaller. Don't get on the computer. Don't get Thank you. She
Oh,
wants
my
to
little
help.
pill.
She wants to help.
Uh-huh.
Now she's gonna
That's why
pout.
I call you my little pill.
Yeah, now she's gonna pout. But
Yep.
that's fine. But it's amazing how we kind of mentioned this a little bit earlier, but I kind of want to circle back to it. The idea that limiting one of those senses or limiting some of those can help. Going into a space that has controlled sounds because you have white noise there, or going into a space that is instantly darker, or that only has, one light source as opposed to like 16 coming from different angles. How that can help in sensory overload, even if you don't have super major sensory problems. If you find that you're tense sometimes and you notice that, oh, and every time I go into this room specifically, I feel a little bit better.
And everybody has a unique calming.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, I have a sensory room. So, like, I can change the color temperature of the room. So, my room is completely blue. There's a huge difference between sensory seeking and sensory avoiding as well.
Uh-huh.
Some people, if they're sensory seeking, they want the patterns and the other things and the stars on the wall. If they're sensory avoiding, a blank canvas with just a color change is going to be necessary. And I always
Or
recommend
no light
people
at
to,
all.
yeah, or no light at all. So I always recommend people to try it out and try different colors and then find out what makes you calmer and then stick with that.
Yeah.
For me, it's blue.
Yeah. Blues or like a light sage green always is really nice to me.
Green activates me.
There's a specific color of green that's okay. The rest of them are not. But there's
Okay.
it's that like Zen garden green.
Gotcha.
That one is kind of like, okay, all right, all right. But most blues are okay unless they're just bright. Um, Tangent. How many sounds do you use that aren't words that we're just supposed to know what they mean?
I don't understand what you mean.
Well, like just now, it's that you go into a room and you're like, I used a sound to convey an emotion and a feeling, and you knew what I meant.
Oh, 100%.
But that was not a word. We had a conversation with somebody this weekend. I was trying to explain the design of my living room, and I said that there's a cutout behind the kitchen, and it goes beep.
Yeah.
You just started chuckling at me, and the person I was talking to goes, "Excuse me, a what?" And I'm like, a little beep. And but like I knew exactly what I was talking about. There's a little cutout right behind the kitchen. It's about so big, so it was a weep. If it was bigger, it would have been like a whoop, But like we know those kinds of things and we know what they mean. Also, every ADHD person I've ever met has a reset noise.
That's fair. Okay. So I remember a friend in the military, and I kid you not, we had this conversation
Mm-hmm.
for like 45 minutes about the different sounds of bee mix because it's not really a buzz. And we just went back and forth
I would have that
with
conversation.
the exact noise, and I can't even remember what we agreed on. It's so strange. But it's like that's one of those times you look back, it's like, yeah, I should have known I was
Yeah,
autistic.
just maybe.
Like, yeah,
But at the time, that was a really important conversation.
very important.
But like there's again, that's a whole other language that we've adopted
Yeah.
that we all kind of get the general idea of what that means. Neurotypicals go, what on earth are you talking about?
Would that fall under echolalia?
Maybe. Um, that this is what I don't know. There's some debate out there as to whether like echolalia, however you pronounce it,
Yeah.
is words only and repetition of words only, like parroting, or mimicry. And if it's not just sound and words that you hear that then you continue to repeat almost like
See, I always thought it was something different.
if you look up the definition, they say it's hearing and repeating, very much like a crow would do. But I'm more tempted to kind of believe that it is sound hyperfocus is what echolalia would be. So things like getting music stuck in your head. Did you know that the average person doesn't get music stuck in their head?
Interesting.
And not only that, they don't get like 3 or 4 measures of a song or a chorus of a song stuck in their head. I can have like a certain transition of a song stuck in my head for days.
And like, so I always thought of it like, so for example, I have movie quotes or song quotes
On speed dial?
on speed dial for certain emotional situations that I can call upon. Like I have just the right words to use because there's a song that, or there's a
But
movie.
I would argue that that is a survivor skill based on our inability to emotionally regulate and emotionally communicate. So I am often called by our friend group as the queen of analogies because I
Yeah.
love analogies. You know why I use analogies? Because I can't put words to how I feel, but I can tell you what it's like.
hmm Just like I know I have like a lot of empathy because I don't know what other people are experiencing. So I always try to put myself in somebody else's shoes
Mhm.
because I don't know what I would do. So I'm always going to default. What would you do? Tell
Yeah.
me more. I'm curious because I want to know because I have no idea what I would do.
There's also this concept that I've kind of been toying around with, and this is a personal opinion. Please don't take it and run with it. That neurodivergents are actually more open in a lot of ways to things like equity, to things like code switching, and putting and have a higher capacity for empathy because our whole lives we have had to look at somebody else or a different culture or a different world set and go, okay, what is happening here? How can I mimic this? How can I react to this? How can I whatever? And we have to put ourselves in other people's shoes all the time in order to make sense of the world.
Yep.
So if someone comes up to you and says, "Hey, we're no longer using the word non
Nonverbal.
nonverbal, we're using the term non-speaking now."
Okay.
We just go, okay, cataloging, putting that back in, making sure that I go back to those other places and do that all that recataloging. That I go, okay, cool. I've adjusted. I've added it to the memory banks. Good. Whereas you'll see more often than not, neurotypicals going, well, why can't we use that other word? Because it's not the right word anymore. And we just go, okay, noted. We're moving on.
It's hard not to have empathy for people when you've been treated as less than.
We're just so othered.
Yeah. And I don't think a lot of people understand how isolating that is. Like I remember countless situations where like you would have an entire group of people go around and start talking about going to lunch together. And they walk right by you and your desk and they don't include you.
Mm.
And they include everybody else in the office but you. I've been there before more than one occasion. And so because of that, I try if I see somebody eating alone, I can buy them lunch.
At the same time, I've also invited that person, and because I didn't use the right terminology, they thought they weren't actually welcome. There's this whole conversation about, for autistics especially, saying, you can come if you want. That's not an invitation.
No, it's not.
That is, if you showed up, I wouldn't kick you out.
Yeah.
Is what that means.
And I think that's an important distinction.
Yeah. And most people don't realize that. You have to actually say, I would like you to come to this. I would like you to be there.
Yeah.
If you're comfortable with it. So then it's like, because to the neurotypical, though, that feels super forward. That feels like you have to come. And no, but if you just say, you can come if you want, tells me you don't actually want me to be there potentially.
Yeah.
And now I have all these questions. If I want, if you want, who's making this decision? There's too many what ifs.
I appreciate that.
Yeah. So if you're working with your neurodivergent folks, especially your autistic folks, and you want them to come along, you have to specifically tell them, I would like you to be there if you can, if you wish. Otherwise, an open invitation of, yeah, sure, you can come along, is not going to cut it.
Just like our conversation about sure.
What are you doing, Willow?
So I had a conversation with somebody the other day because I say sure a lot.
Uh-huh.
And it wasn't until this last week I realized that some people may understand sure as a negative response.
It can be to some people.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah. It has to do with vocal inflection, but so many people try to mask vocal inflection that sure is often I don't really want to say yes, but I guess. Like an eye roll, I guess. Whereas to you, because I know you well enough. I know that sure means sure.
Yeah, sure just means yes.
Yes.
I hate using the same word over and over
Yeah.
and over again.
But if I saw a text message that said sure period from anyone else in my contact list,
Yeah.
I would be like, oh, they must.
Fine.
Yeah, I guess if you have to, you know.
But I'm genuinely
I
excited
know,
still
but
to say, sure, yeah, absolutely.
but I know that that's you, and that's not most of the rest of the world. Most of the rest of the world, they'd have to be like, are they okay? Same with a thumbs up. If I get a thumbs up emoji, that usually means stop talking, please. But I know that that's not what you mean by it, so I've had to recatalog what that means when it comes to you. You have your own unique manual in how to interact. But if I receive a thumbs up from anyone else, it means shut up and stop talking, please.
Well,
I'm done with this conversation.
Now I'm curious because I'm going to go back through my Rolodex.
I know, because we're going to go back and reindex everything. Sorry.
Yeah, no. I don't apologize. I'm pretty sure that has been the source of a few different conflicts along the way the last year and a half.
Because a lot of times the thumbs up emoji is seen like,
yeah,
cool story, bro. It's seen with that sort of like inflected sarcasm, like, I got it, shut up, stop talking. It shows like a lack of engagement. It shows I couldn't even be bothered to say okay. It's the emoji equivalent of K period.
Huh.
To some people it is. Not everybody, but to a millennial generation, it's the emotional equivalent of K period.
I have to readjust them.
It's the conversations we have all the time. You think this is a special conversation? This is just a Monday for us.
Yeah, pretty much.
It's conversations all the time. And someone going, hold on, recalibrating. We talk about how there's so many moments in our friendship where it's like having your Siri on, or your map directions on, or your Waze, or whatever you have. And then you take a wrong turn, and then you have to go, okay, hold on, I'm recalibrating.
Yeah.
Finding another route. Hold on.
Yeah, okay, I made it. I'll just text you processing.
Yeah. Which helps me a ton, because I am one of those people with my anxiety levels that if you just stop talking, I assume that I have pissed you off.
Yeah.
So when you are thinking...
I have learned that about you.
Yeah.
So I've adjusted myself.
I appreciate it, because there's so many times at the beginning of our friendship where I was like, you hate me now?
I know, literally, this is brand new information that just wrecked my brain, and I have to recalibrate a lot.
Yeah. So I just get text messages that go, processing, ... And I go, all right, I'm good. Let me know when you're done. Because here's the thing. You are a processor. You need time to unpack things.
Yeah.
I am a verbal processor. Yeah. I don't know what I think until I'm having the conversation.
Yeah. And I don't think in words. So when I word vomit, I'm translating pictures into words on the fly. I'm just lucky I'm smart enough to do that in real time.
Mine's more like, oh, look at that's what I think right there. Look at that.
Yeah.
I didn't know I thought that. That's amazing.
Yeah. Well, and I told you I didn't even know I could talk to myself.
That's right. I forgot about that one.
Yeah. It was about
that
3 or 4 years ago.
Me.
It was 3 or 4 years ago. I was with a group of fellow autistic people, and we were all just talking about like how our brains work. And I'll never forget it. It was Molly. I love her to death. She's awesome. But she's like, well, what do you do about the little voice on your shoulder? I'm like, what voice on my shoulder? And she's like, well, you don't have a little voice inside of you that tells you this. Like, no. Like, when I stop, it's silent. Like, there is nothing going on.
So jealous.
And because I didn't know I could talk to myself up until that moment in time, there was so much that I didn't have the ability to process. I didn't have enough ability to sort of not negotiate.
I can imagine, yeah.
And so, like, I almost became like non-speaking for almost a month and a half after that.
Yeah.
Because I had to talk to myself. And I would just sit there at night, staring at the wall, just talking to myself. And it was just this huge, like, weight lifted off my shoulders, because, like, wait a minute. I can actually process things.
I mean, I've got 35 years of backlog to work through.
Years.
Oh, there you go.
Or no, 42 years.
There you go. Backlog.
42.
Backlog.
42, and I just found out I could talk to myself.
See, but here's the nice thing about that. You can still turn it off when you need
Oh,
to.
yeah, 100%.
I don't have that luxury.
Yeah.
So my brain is the kind that'll just sit there and be like, you're getting ready to go to sleep, and you're like, I wonder if capybaras can feel the webs in between their toes. And you're like, that's not important information now, brain. We can probably, but we could probably go to sleep. And they're like, remember that one time in 3rd grade when you like puked on the floor? I wonder if anyone thought that you were weird because of that. Who cares? Like, it's just this Rolodex of stream of consciousness, and it's the weirdest stuff that doesn't make any sense. But you're like, thank heavens for the internet, because what would us neurodivergent people have done before the days when you're sitting there trying to go to sleep and you need to know whether or not capybaras have nose hairs? Like, what would we have done before that?
In a way, life was simpler. Because I was a product of both, right?
Yeah, that's fair.
I was a teenager before.
I'm a little bit younger than you are, so I missed most of that. Like, I still remember having to use an encyclopedia, but like...
And I remember being okay with not knowing.
I wonder if that's age, though.
When I didn't have access.
Yeah.
And as soon as I had access...
Well, now I have to know.
Now I have to know.
Because it's right there. It's right there.
So maybe technology is a blessing and a curse.
It usually is.
Yeah.
It usually is. Mm-hmm. But, yeah. It's interesting the differences in our brains sometimes, and we'll have this conversation all the time of, oh, really? That's how it works for you? That's not how it works for me.
Yeah.
And we're talking about that little internal voice or whatnot that kind of digests your brain capacity. Sometimes I have a couple. And not like in a I'm hearing voices or multiple personalities kind of way, but in just like different perspectives of myself can have a conversation, and it's very bizarre.
That is very interesting.
Yeah. So part of me will be like this, well, like the conversation of what was the one we said that I know that's completely illogical, but I'm feeling it anyway. I don't remember what it was. That one.
The one we just had.
The one we just said. That one. You remember. That's what matters. But that conversation, that's both voices or multiple voices going. Part of me goes, I know this is completely illogical. And it's sitting there being super judgmental, which is not helpful, going, this is ridiculous. This is a most ridiculous thought you've had in the last 24 hours. And the other part of me is going, I don't care. It's what, the cheese moon is still going to fall on us someday, and it's going to melt, and there's not going to be enough nachos. Like, what?
And I have had, over the last year and a half, made a conscious choice to stop the negative self-talk.
I've tried. I'm getting better.
Trying is the optimal. So I'm still not there yet. But I am trying. And one of the things that I have to do is if I catch myself, I have to tell myself. I literally have to stop and tell myself.
There are things with my anxiety that if my brain pattern starts doing that, I will literally out loud be like, nope.
Yeah.
Mm-mm.
Don't do that right now, brain.
Not today.
No.
And if it keeps happening, I will, nope. And it's weird because people are like, what are you doing? We're like, stopping a brain pattern, and you have to do it out loud.
And if you encounter somebody who is neurodivergent and they say they need a brain break for the day, give them that dang brain break for the day.
It means we are spent.
Yes. When we say, please don't text us, I'm okay, I need a minute. Give us a minute.
I'm overpeopled. Mm-hmm. I don't get overpeopled as much, but I do sometimes run out of spoons or words.
I get over situationed as opposed to overpeopled.
It's fair.
Yeah.
My capacity for, I'm over crises.
Yeah. Yeah.
Crises.
Yeah.
For the day. That's funny. There was one that I was going to bring up, and I just forgot what it was. Let's see if I can get it. Go ahead. You can continue talking. I'll see if I can grab it.
So it's just the other day when I had my day planned out. And then I got to my first thing, and it didn't go exactly as planned. It sort of derailed my ability to function the whole day. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm lucky I was able to say, hey, Holly, can you drive? Because I can't. I have a morning.
Yeah.
And some people don't have the luxury of having that person that they can actually rely on.
And somebody who gets it. I mean, it's That's what it was. Ding, found it. One of the things that really helped me, and I argued with this internally for a really long time, is the idea that if you're neurodivergent, you will have a 100%, it's not fail rate, or what's the one where you relapse? You'll have a 100% relapse rate, which means at some point in time, you will fail.
Yeah.
And you have to be okay with that.
Yeah.
I don't care if you are Superman. At some point, if you are neurodivergent, that habit is not going to stick. That whatever is, that change that you made is going to relapse. And so you have to be prepared for that's not a failing on your part. That is your brain reverting to a previous pattern that it had. It's like accidentally loading up a previous save on a game or something like that.
Yeah.
And you're like, I didn't want this one. Well, this is the one that loaded today. And it's hard, and it's hard to accept, but it is in fact true. Like, it is really hard to make new habits as a neurodivergent person, and you have to make habits that are sustainable.
Yeah.
Because you have to set the bar at your worst day, and we don't do that because we have high fluctuations in output. And so I luckily have bosses right now who are very flexible and understand my neurodivergency. And not the one I have instantly right this minute, but the one I had previously, we've had conversations about varied output and how I'm lucky enough in the current position I have to have a job where I can come in and have a 40% output day and still knock it out of the park.
Yeah.
And that's okay.
That's rare.
Yes.
It's rare. We have a very rare
We're lucky.
situation.
We're very lucky.
Yeah. It's not very common where you can be authentically neurodivergent at work.
Yes.
It's very rare.
Yeah.
In the private sector, I actually recommend people don't do it.
Yeah.
So don't let people know you're neurodivergent.
I think it would depend on the situation a little bit, but yeah, as a whole, as kind of that, again, that stereotypical response, it probably has more capacity for a backlash than not.
The weird part is, and there's no getting around this, it doesn't matter. Every person, with very, very, very few exceptions, treats me differently the minute they know I'm autistic.
I think that goes back to that stigma, though.
100%.
That we still haven't quite gotten over that image of autism being this one way and only this one way.
And so it's to the point, though, where I can predict something is going to happen. Whether it's positive or negative, I can never tell. But I don't know if we'll ever get to the point where that isn't the case.
I think we will. I think we will, but I think we will for not the same reason that I think you do. I think that in the coming years that we're going to see a lot more things starting to fall under the neurodivergent umbrella. And I think eventually ADHD is going to be put in the autism spectrum as just one more plot point. And I think that's going to change the game a little bit.
Do you think it's going to be better?
I don't know if it'll be better, but I think it will change the game a little bit.
Yeah.
I think that the autism community will feel a little bit of a loss of identity when that happens.
Mm-hmm. Just like what happened when they folded in Asperger's.
Yeah.
There was a lot of lost identities overnight that people didn't understand.
And I think that it will come back, but I think there will have to be, again, like we've talked about, we're going to have to go backwards and recatalog everything, and that's a lot of emotional labor, and people get really grumpy at having to do that emotional labor. But
the people who make the decisions don't have us at the table to make that.
Well, they don't have the need to go back and recatalog. They just say, we've made the change. Going forward, it's this. I'm like, that's great going forward. I have no problem with going forward. It's all the however many years of previous that I have to go back and redo in my head. I have to change it on, you change the name of the company, and I have to go back and change the letterhead from 1947.
And you have to shift your own personal perspective along the way.
Yeah.
So in essence, when you're going back, you're also changing you as the fabric of a human being.
Or the lens that you see it with, yeah.
And so it kind of hits on both ways.
Yeah.
And I never know how long it's going to take for my brain to process.
It'd be like if you thought your entire childhood was in black and white film.
Yeah.
And then realizing in your 20s or your 30s that it was actually in color, and having to go back and re-experience those things and realize that that wasn't just dark gray, it was red.
Yeah, and then I don't know about you, but like when I go back and I go through memories, um, a part of the emotion of that memory comes along with that
Yeah,
recalibration.
it's it's a full-on virtual reality of that event. I am
Yeah,
reliving it,
yeah,
which is why, again, trauma is so therapy is so helpful for the trauma that we have experienced. But why it's extra hard is because we don't really have the ability to talk about it and not feel it again.
100%.
Which is why a lot of people tend to just shove it in a closet and not deal with it, but that doesn't really help either. Um, but it can be very activating
Yeah.
for people to deal with traumatic events, especially neurodivergence, because we feel so strongly in the first place. You know, we have that 11 feeling range, and now you're wanting us to go back into that moment and use our super empathy, which is weird because people always say that like autistics don't have empathy.
Oh, I hate
No,
that.
they have super empathy and they have to turn it off because it's suffocating.
And they say we don't have empathy because, like, for me, my emotions don't match my facial expression most of the time.
That's true.
And so the people are trying to figure out how I'm feeling based on how my face is going. And I'm 100% sure that people get it wrong 90% of the time. Or like they think, well, I think one way or think of the other way. Like, no, you just surprised me with so much information that I don't know how to
My
process,
face
and I'm
shut
kind of
off.
stuck. Yeah. And then 3 days later, it'll finally hit me the gravity of the situation,
Yeah.
and I lose the moment for connection. You know, like I remember like all of these like big, huge company things. Like they would have these events designed to like bring people and have these transformational moments where you get lifelong friends. I get so overloaded with information that I can't process
Yeah.
that by the time we hit that part where you're supposed to be making that connection,
Yeah.
I'm still 5 minutes back.
At least, if not,
Yeah,
20.
yeah. And so like I'm always like I would love at one moment in time in my life to go through one of those conferences and walk away with an amazing friend.
We just need to schedule more lunch breaks, I think.
Stop leaving.
Well, that's true too. If you just peace out,
At the
then
end of the event, I'm so drained, and
yeah, that's
I
fair.
just need, I'm out,
Yeah, that's fair.
and it gets me.
There's the
Like with karaoke,
uh-huh,
just this last 2 weeks ago,
uh-huh.
Amy finally figured out why I leave the way that I leave. And it's like at some point my sensory limit is had it and I'm out.
Yeah.
And I can't tell you if it's gonna be at 11:30, 12:30,
Might be at 9:15. Who
9:15,
knows?
right?
We just got here at 9, might be 9:15. We don't
Yeah.
know. And it's amazing what taxes that, and it has nothing to do with what's here.
Yeah.
There are days that I walk into a situation I went to a like a family barbecue this weekend, and there were about 50 people, about 30 of which were children under the age of 15.
That's a lot.
It's a lot of yelling and running around and just everything. And my brain is one that cannot filter sounds. So I was hearing my conversation, my mother's conversation, my grandmother's conversation, the people across the table, people across the room,
Wow.
and I'm trying to ignore these and listen to these, but some of these words are bleeding in, and it's a lot. It's a lot. And I started to feel myself getting more and more and more exhausted as time went on. And it wasn't, on the outside, how do you explain to somebody, I'm sorry, I'm hearing too many conversations right now?
Yeah. It sounds to the person who is uninformed, it sounds, for lack of a better term, crazy.
It sounds fake.
Yeah.
It sounds like you're making it up.
You're crazy.
Yeah.
But it's like, no, my brain just
Or a
works.
snowflake,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Just you that sensitive, really?
Yeah. Hmm.
No, but you don't
And I use
understand.
that term only because I've been called that for my brain being different before.
Yeah.
You
Same.
must be crazy
Yeah.
because you're giving voice to how your brain works.
I have to because my brain and my body and who I am as a human being Those are three different entities.
Oh, 100%.
And they don't always play together. They don't always play nice together. There are days when, then in our group conversations that we have with some of our friends who are all neurodivergent, by the way.
I know.
Our core group of people, all of us are neurodivergent. And so sometimes you're being like, my brain is having a day. So me and my brain are going to peace out for the night. And those are two separate people because, well, we were explaining the other day when we were, I don't remember where we were going. I was explaining the difference between mental anxiety and bodily anxiety.
Yeah.
And you were like, huh?
Yeah.
And I went, no, there's a total difference between my brain is spinning and I'm having anxiety because I'm ruminating on a thought, and my body is hyperstimulated anxiety, and my brain's just chill as a cucumber, and my body's having a freak out.
See, and I've never experienced that. It's just my brain just keeps going.
And so I'm sitting here trying to tell a doctor that, no, my brain is fine. I don't need more therapy. I have done all the therapy I can. I am still anxious. Now what? And how do you have those conversations with people? Well, you just need to do some deep breathing. Do I? Do I just need to do some deep breathing? You're depressed. Have you tried not being sad? Amazing.
I know, right?
Why didn't I think of that?
I forgot to turn off the switch.
Yeah. I wondered what that smell was. That's like autistic people saying that they don't have, friends or can't make friends. Well, have you tried going out more? That's not the solution.
Yeah, no, that's not it. That's not it.
I can't meet people that I relate with on a dating spectrum. Well, do you go to a bar? That's not it either. That's not where us neurodivergent, and there's nothing wrong with that. I'm just saying.
I want to throw this out there for the record.
Yeah.
Finding somebody in a bar is probably not the best choice for a partner.
I mean, to each their own. I'm not going to judge. That's not what we're here for. But at the same time, if we're all there to unwind and let go and re-deal with the stress that we had or whatever, or just, I mean, I guess it depends. I would say it depends, right?
Yeah.
If you're there to get wasted, is that when you want to be meeting the future partner in your life?
That's kind of my point.
Right?
Yeah.
But there's reasons you could go, you can go to karaoke. You can meet somebody there, a little bit different. But just weigh your options.
Let me rephrase it this way then. Don't take advantage of somebody who's really trying. It's not a good start to a relationship. I guess that's really what I was trying to say.
I agree. And I don't disagree with you. I'm just saying that, I can see where there would be an exception to that. And someone who's like, well, I met my partner and just saying as a rule of thumb, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, Holly, we've been at it for a while.
We're pretty chatty.
Yeah. So let's wrap this up.
Let's do it.
Let's do this again.
Let's do it again. Yeah.
Yeah.
I liked it.
Same here.
I mean, this is just a Monday for us. Maybe we'll capture another one sometime.
Be kind, y'all. Peace out.